be seated as we'll start the last plenary of the conference. Thank you. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez prendre vos places. Nous allons commencer. Please be seated. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you all very much. Before we kick off the last session in this international conference on feminist foreign policies, and I'll give it in English.
This is the last plenary and the last discussion of the fourth ministerial conference on feminist foreign policies. But the conference is not over. After this closes up, we do have a closing ceremony and a reception waiting for you. The closing ceremony and reception does not take place here. It takes place at the Quai d'Orsay, at the Hôtel du Ministre. A bit more fancy than here. Once the session is over, there will be buses waiting just outside to drive you directly to the Quai d'Orsay. The reception will start at 6:30, and the minister will speak at 7, and then everybody enjoys a cup of champagne. Thank you very much. So do not leave here unless you're going to the Quai d'Orsay after this, and everybody's invited, of course. Thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce the last plenary on women, peace, and security, and to introduce the moderator, Isabelle Rome, the Ambassador for Human Rights.
Alors, j'aimerais tout d'abord
Let me start, ladies and gentlemen, by calling up Sima Pados, who is a UN Deputy Secretary General and also works for UN Women.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here again today. We were here yesterday together and we had a wonderful, wonderful opening of this conference. Thank you, France, again for a wonderful conference and for bringing us all together here. Excellencies, we do meet today as we reflect on 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and 25 since Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. In a world ever more beset by conflict, our women, peace and security agenda is ever more crucial, and I'm sure you all agree with me. In 2024, some 676 million women lived within 50 kilometers of a conflict, the highest since 1990s. Today, we also have the highest number of active conflicts since 1949. The number of women and children killed in armed conflicts quadrupled between 2023 and 2024 compared to the two preceding years. Sexual violence in conflict rose by 87% in just 2 years. I remind us that these statistics are people, are women and girls and families and children. The Sudanese mother raising a family alone, facing 3 times higher risk of food insecurity than the average in her country, hoping, despite this, that her children will eat today. The women in Afghanistan who tell us they are increasingly oppressed, suffer anxiety, and feel isolated. The women in Ukraine who hope for peace. And, of course, the women in Gaza who hope that the ceasefire holds, that peace will find them too. Given these realities, it is perverse that as military spending rises, now almost $2 trillion more per year than when Resolution 1325 was agreed. Funding for women's organizations in crisis, though, is collapsing. As we know, women's involvement leads to more successful peace processes, that where women lead, peace follows. So it is unacceptable that 87% of peace talks last year had no women among the negotiators. That peace talks proceed without women at the table is a failure of leadership and of vision. Inclusion, my dear excellencies and friends and feminists, inclusion is not optional. It is a requirement for lasting peace. So, excellencies, feminists, we are not daunted by these challenges. Our commitment to the women, peace and security agenda is undimmed. We continue to work towards solutions and their implementation. All are achievable if we choose so. Earlier this week, the Secretary General of the United Nations released his annual report on women, peace and security. It is a clear call to action to all peace and security actors. It advocates for bringing resources to bear, including earmarked funding where they are needed most. For example, it proposes that at least 1% of ODA go directly to women's organizations in conflict-affected countries, and a redirection of resources towards peace building and women-led recovery. It lays out an accountability framework, quotas, targets, incentives, and mandatory requirements. It also proposes binding targets and quotas for full, equal, and safe participation in peace and political processes, and an end to impunity for all acts of gender-based persecution, reproductive violence, and conflict-related sexual violence. It highlights the indispensability of gender data so that women's experiences in crisis are counted, are visible, and drive decision-making. Excellencies, this is a feminist approach to crisis. It is right, it is effective, it is our obligation. UN Women will continue to work with all of you to bring this about. I look forward to our discussions today on this panel, and most of all, our work together as we go forward from here. And we always say, we push back against the pushback, and we go forward. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Dear Samabous, I'd now like to call Mrs. Pamela Patton, who is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and Special Representative of the Secretary General for the question of sexual violence in times of conflict. Madam, you have the floor.
Merci, chère Isabelle. Good afternoon, and excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I know the conference is not over, but I think it's fitting to congratulate France for a very successful two-day conference. I also commend the government for hosting this fourth ministerial conference on feminist foreign policy, which coincides with the 25 years of Resolution 1325, a milestone in the recognition by the highest body tasked with maintaining international peace and security that peace is inextricably linked with gender equality and women's leadership. As many speakers have said before, a quarter century later, it is unfortunately only fitting that we commemorate rather than celebrate these milestones, given today's grim realities. Though there have been successes in implementation, the world has changed since October 2000. The nature of conflict and even our understanding of peace and security have evolved. And this ever-changing reality poses multiple and major challenges and dilemmas for the four pillars of Security Council Resolution 1325. But what is encouraging is that the WPS agenda is not a finished project, but an evolving framework. Therefore, upholding feminist principles requires not only defending past gains, but also reimagining what peace, security, and justice can mean in a rapidly changing world. Today, more than ever before, feminist foreign policies must complement the WPS agenda to reclaim its potential for structural transformation. In 2009, the Security Council unanimously created a mandate to confront the scourge of wartime sexual violence, marking a historic recognition that sexual violence is preventable, not inevitable, a crime of war, not collateral damage. 6 subsequent resolutions of the Council established a robust normative framework, affirming that there could be no security without women's security. And this is at the heart of feminist foreign policy, placing women's and girls' rights, safety, and agency at the center of every decision about peace and security. We meet amid great global turbulence, with conflicts raging, impunity escalating, and inequalities widening. The world, as Sima just mentioned, faces the highest number of conflicts since World War II, with over 130 million forcibly displaced, the majority being women and girls, and 676 million women living near deadly conflicts. Militarization is on the march while women's rights are being turned back. In 2024 alone, more than 4,600 cases of conflict-related sexual violence were documented, a 24% rise from 2023, which itself had risen by 50% from the year before. Sexual violence against children increased by 35%. And this year's report highlights worsening brutality, with gang rapes followed by execution, sexual violence linked to food insecurity, proliferation of small arms fueling atrocities, and security vacuums following UN mission drawdowns, risking the reversal of progress in protection and survivor support. Yet, as needs rise, shelters are shuttering, medical supplies for rape victims are running out, clinics are closing their doors, and women's organizations are going from underfunded to unfunded. Instead of defending transformative progress, we are defunding life-saving programs. We are told there's no money for life-saving aid, and that it is a question of competing priorities. Yet, global military spending has reached a record high of $2.7 trillion. Excellencies, I ask you, what do we tell the women and girls in Sudan, where sexual violence is once again being used to terrorize and displace communities, with devastating reports of women in Darfur committing suicide rather than facing the near certainty of rape by armed men? What do we tell the women in Eastern DRC, displaced multiple times, facing acute food insecurity, who out of sheer desperation are selling their bodies for less than $1 to buy food? What is it that takes precedence over the safety and rights of civilians? What future do we expect to build on the broken bodies and broken dreams of abused women and girls? Thousands of survivors are losing access to medical care, psychological support, shelter, and legal redress. What will be the price tag? It can only be more chaos, more displacement, broken promises, resentment and extremism, fanning the flames of hostility and fueling the next wave of warfare, wiping out decades of development gains. Excellencies, we do not have the luxury of looking away. We do not have the luxury of reciting words of condemnation and moving on when survivors lack support to move on with their lives. We must act decisively and boldly. I would like to conclude and to leave you with a few recommendations. Firstly, how critical it is to preserve and strengthen the normative framework on sexual violence in conflict. Second, ensure that survivors of sexual violence in conflict have a meaningful voice in peace and transitional justice processes. Third, match rhetoric with resources that are robust, flexible, and sustained, especially for women's organizations in conflict-affected countries. Last but not least, feminist foreign policies must be accompanied by funding commitments and targets. By harnessing the complementarity between feminist foreign policies and the Women, Peace and Security agenda, we can empower women to not only survive the conflict, but shape the peace. And as Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie observed, feminism is dreaming of how the world could be better. And indeed, I'm sure we will all agree that the feminist movement has proven to be one of the most visionary forces on the planet. And at this juncture, in this era of intersecting misogyny and militarism, it may well be humanity's last best hope for transformation. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much, dear Pramila Patten. Ladies and gentlemen, and by that I mean all protocols observed, ministers, ambassadors. Today we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 of the UN Security Council, which laid the foundation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, which is based on everything. Over 100 countries have adopted national action plans to implement this agenda, which is good news for us. France is currently working on producing its fourth national plan for women, peace and security, and we will continue in that context to set ambitious and pragmatic goals. However, the global context is characterized today by pushback, rollback, fear and discrimination. Women and girls are systematically in the front line of those impacted by that rollback, that oppression, those conflicts. In particular, I would like to express my solidarity to girls and women in Afghanistan who are muzzled by Taliban obscurantism. We have heard that conflicts are growing and inequality grows as conflicts and crises emerge and grow. So we need more than ever a bold, cross-cutting approach, placing women and girls the heart of everything that we do, whether talking about peace, security, or humanitarian aid. We still have a long way to go today. Only 5% of mediators and 8% of negotiators in peace processes are women, and yet their participation is a 35% increased guarantee of success. France supports full, equal, and significant involvement of women in all stages of peace process, valorizing their role as drivers of stability. And to do so, we are launching a network of women mediators in the Francophone world. But our responsibility doesn't stop at the negotiating table. The role of women in reconciliation and reconstruction in post-conflict periods is more than crucial. The combat against sexual violence in times of conflict remains a priority. This struggle calls for an approach focused on survivors, as you've said, providing genuine access to justice, care, and reparations, and also guaranteeing an undying battle against impunity. Our collective determination is now facing new challenges that are growing every day. Climate change, global warming, and new technologies and AI. All of these are new factors leading to discrimination against women, whilst they could be providing solutions and innovation. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's our responsibility together to produce a shared multilateral program based on shared values, a roadmap towards equality, both in times of war and peace. But above all, we have to make sure that gender equality is real, in particular in the most difficult of situations. In order to do that, we need to listen to survivors and support those working in the field, promote dialogue, and make sure that voices that have long gone unheard are finally listened to. And what ministries can do there is of key importance, because it's a vision based on human rights in a world where women's rights are neither accessory nor irrelevant. So they're vital for a fair, stable global order. So taking forward women's rights is crucial to creating sustainable, fair societies. So to address all of these issues, it's our honor to welcome today Alexandra Aleshuk. I'd ask her to step up. Alexandra Mavichuk, thank you for being here. So Alexandra Mavichuk is a lawyer and activist. Have you got headphones for translation?
It's okay for the translation? No.
You haven't got headphones. Okay, well, I'm sure someone will provide you with them.
It's okay? Okay.
You can hear now. Okay, good. Then we can continue. So, Alexandra Mavichuk, you're a lawyer and human rights activist, and you are a key figure in Ukrainian civil society with your organization, Center for Civil Liberties, as a result of which you were winner of Nobel Peace Prize in 2022. I'd also like to call up His Excellency Arzat Mitroyan, who is Minister of Foreign Affairs in Armenia. Please, Minister, if you'd be so kind as to step up. I'd also like to call on Chris Elmore, who is Parliamentary Undersecretary with responsibility for multilateral affairs and human rights in the UK. So please do step up, Parliamentary Undersecretary. Then we have Mrs. Zara Langui, who is advisor to the UN Special Envoy to Yemen. So if you'd be so kind as to join us on the stage. We also have Victoria Sandino, who is a former commander of FARC-EP and who negotiated the final peace agreement and was also coordinator of the subcommittee on gender and a member of the Colombian Senate. So we will now start our roundtable discussion. So
Donc je vais commencer par
I'll first turn to Alexander Marichuk. We are delighted to have you with us today. It's a great honor to see you in the room today. I'd like to ask you about the impact of the Ukraine war on gender equality, the women and girls who are in the front line of fighting for peace, democracy and freedom. How does your Center for Civil Liberties work in order to document this conflict and in particular its gender aspect?
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. It's a huge honor for me to address to this distinguished audience. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm documenting war crimes in this war which Russia has launched against Ukraine for 12 years. While this war turns people into the numbers, what we are literally doing, we are returning people their names, because people are not numbers, and life of each person matters. We have in our database more than 89,000 episodes of war crimes. And for sure, unfortunately, among this episode, there are a lot of crimes against women and children. But let me assure you that women in Ukraine, they're not just victims of this Russian war of aggression, they are fighters. I know enormous amount of fantastic women in different fields of society. Women document war crimes, women take political decisions, women joined Ukraine's armed forces, women coordinate civil initiatives, women are in the far front of this battle for freedom and democracy because bravery has no gender. And this war has a very vivid gender perspective. It's not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. Because in democracy, women can perform any role they want in family and society, but in Russia and in authoritarian countries, women can perform only a assigned role for them in families and societies. And this is a basis for authoritarian regimes, because how people treat each other in society, it's always just a reflection what government can do towards its own people. And that is why in Iran, women are severely persecuted and jailed for wearing inappropriate clothes. In Afghanistan, women are prohibited to study in university and schools. And in Russia, even domestic violence was decriminalized because, once again, it's just a projection what government is doing towards its own people. So my main message today is that women must support women. Women must support women who are fighting in different fields of society, who are fighting in different countries, because their fight, it's our fight. They are fighting that our own daughters will never face a situation that they have to prove someone that they are also a human beings.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Beaucoup, chère Alexandra.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Votre Excellence,
Excellency,
Monsieur le ministre Mirzoyan,
Minister Mirzoyan, at this time when the women, peace, security agenda is being challenged, Armenia has taken a position, has just adopted a national action plan from 25-27 that's very ambitious. So why are you focusing on WPS today, and what does that mean over and above the numerical presence of women, over and above the numbers? How can one really take on board gender equality, and what would you say to those who no longer believe in it?
Well, thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure to be here and to take part in this very important conversation. First of all, and please, dear women, don't judge me too strong, but first of all, for us, this is not about numbers, you know, this is about human rights, and this is about democracy. To put the long story short, this is about equal rights and equal opportunities. I strongly believe that no one in the world should not be appointed or promoted or not be appointed to a leading position only because or mainly because she is a woman. And you know what? The boys' club should admit that women are their equal partners and can have the equal role in leading the society. On the other hand, I also believe that no one should be promoted or appointed to a leading position only or mainly because she is a woman. This is the other side of the medal, and I believe that we all should also make an additional attempt to avoid this exaggeration as well. So, secondly, remember I just said that this is not about numbers. Well, it was not the whole truth, because this is also about numbers, because numbers show the real situation in the society, show the trends, show the gaps, show the fields, directions where some additional efforts should be put. And here I'm proud to say that, for instance, when it comes to science, education, technologies, IT industry, Armenia, my country, is well ahead of global average. When it comes to when we've been discussing diplomatic service in my country, in my ministry, 44.4% of the diplomats are women. This is almost an ideal equality. Although I should also confess that this is about the whole system. When it comes to ambassadors, we don't have this equality. So there is a gap to be filled in. Now we have heads of ministries which have traditionally been led by men, like Ministry of Interior, like Prosecutor General's Office, like newly founded Intelligence Service. So this is part of the men's club, right? And the action plan that you just mentioned has a very clear goal, for instance, to increase women's participation in institutions like army and police, which have traditionally had the aura of a very masculine aura, masculine face. So there is an index that I just want to indicate, global gender gap index. So according to this rating, according to this index, Armenia has closed 73.1% of its gender gap, which is, you know, it's not ideal, but it also shows the trend. It also shows that we do have the willingness to fill this gap. And interestingly, public polls show that people in Armenia are more and more not only ready, but also happy to see that there is increasing women participation in leading roles. I mentioned a couple of ministries. This is in addition to what we already have had traditionally, like Ministry of Science, Education, Ministry of Health, etc. And when and this is also a small personal touch probably, when I speak, while speaking to my daughter, when we touch upon these topics, we see that, you know, the youngsters, they demand more. they don't even understand why the human beings can be treated differently based on their gender. And this is very, very good. But, and I'm sorry to take a little bit more of your time, there is also a third dimension, a third layer to this. For my country, this is a very particular, this topic has a particular meaning also because we are a post-conflict society. Maybe it's already well known. We just established peace with Azerbaijan. Now the two countries are trying to put more efforts to fully normalize the relations. So in addition to the efforts of the government to sign formal, I don't know, treaties, to come to concrete solutions, also there is a huge need for reconciliation of societies. And we have been, the previous speaker also touched upon this topic, also we have been discussing these 2 days. We understand, we acknowledge the suffering of women during the conflicts, but we also should, with all due respect and to the suffering, we also should acknowledge that when it comes to communities, the reconciliation of the families, the leading here role of women cannot be, I mean, it's obvious and it's crucial. So this is why also this topic has particular meaning for us. We very much hope that women in our society will find strength to overcome all the suffering, the loss of their beloved ones, the psychological trauma of displacement, and now to prevent future suffering, take the burden and take the responsibility of the reconciliation as well. So thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you very much, Minister. And thank you for focusing on this specific approach with your agenda that is happening just after the conflict. So turning to Mr. Chris Elmore, in this context where we see increasing conflicts and international polarization, the UK's commitment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda is of crucial importance, both in terms of position of principle and the actual multilateral actions. So given these regressions of women's rights and a period of instability and multilateral roadblocks, what is the right approach that we should adopt? And what sort of leeway do you think the UN has, in particular with respect to meaningful involvement of women and gender equality?
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I think for me and for the UK government, there are sort of three key areas. The first being around participation, which has been so eloquently put by the two representatives from the UN, and they're far better placed than I. But it is about the idea that when women participate in decision-making, peace is more meaningful. And the best example of that that is often quoted back at me is the peace process in Northern Ireland. You know, we have a very lived experience of where, not just at a government level, but women in communities that were there at the forefront of not just securing the peace, but ensuring that it was maintained and has lasted, with the occasional bump along the way in terms of the politicians, but actually within Northern Ireland, that peace has been sustained overwhelmingly by women. And it's why, as a government, we've supported women in peace talks in Sudan and the Philippines, because it's about those lived experiences and how they bring about a more meaningful outcome. And it's also where we see rebuilding efforts has been so aptly put by the minister. You know, it's about the long-term positions and the long-term outcomes that women have within that process. And part of the UN's work, of course, is around prevention. I was really pleased to be at United Nations High Level Week, where we talked a lot about prevention rather than just the aftermath of conflict. And actually, one of the key elements for the UK is really about trying to bring justice for survivors and ensuring that women are part of the conversation in preventing the sexual violence in the first place and being part of the Prevention of Sexual Violence Conflict Initiative. It's so incredibly important to us as a government, and specifically important to our new Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, that has spent decades working in this field of tackling sexual violence against women and girls within the UK context, and wants to make that part of one of her key pillars as UK Foreign Secretary, that she increases that role globally, Britain's role in this globally. So that's another important part of these themes. And then, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, but sometimes repetition is important in these conversations so that people actually listen, is around emerging threats, and particularly in the online sphere, and the realities that many women face, not just in public life, but just across society more generally, as we see the rise in misogyny and hate crimes and aggressive masculinity, and the problems that come with this sort of new world of online levels of abuse, and the impact that has on women and girls globally. And I think the UN has a role to play in that, as do all countries. And it's a sort of emerging threat, along with significant issues around climate change and the impact that has on movement of people and migration. And we see that domestically and internationally, within the UK and beyond. And as part of that, which I've sort of touched on, is that technology is, in essence, in some cases, fueling gender-based violence. So we need to be able to respond as global partners at a multilateral and in the domestic sense, to ensure that we are keeping up with technology so that we can try and mitigate and stop and end and prevent these types of organised abuse, of violence, of coordinating rape, of all the elements that wouldn't have existed even 10 years ago, that are now very much part of what women are facing. And I think, as I've mentioned, sort of the final point around climate, it does disproportionately affect women. And my view is that if there are more women in the conversation to explain that impact, then I think it would actually bring about more meaningful change more quickly, because the decision-making would be sped up. I find in my lived experience after 17 years in elected politics, not just having women in the room makes better decisions. Frankly, they're just better decisions, full stop. And I think we need more of that in the broadest possible sense. So thank you very much. It's been an interesting day for me as a relatively new minister, but it's an important part of how we bring about long-lasting change and acknowledge the rollback and fight against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that insight. It's a very encouraging comment here for you. I now would like to turn to you, Mr. Alangi, as advisor to the UN Special Envoy for Yemen. You are very familiar with theatres of war, but also the fast-changing threats to peace and security in this digital age. Against this background, I think we have to face the following issues. How digital and AI change the nature of crises, and to what extent does this development redefine our understanding of security, and how can the WPS agenda and FFP be mobilized in order to face up the risks and opportunities of digital innovation?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today on the intersection of feminist foreign policy, the women, peace, security agenda, and the transformative role of artificial intelligence. I will highlight the critical nexus of peace building, conflict, AI, and gender equality. Well, to address your first question on is AI a luxury for conflict zones, I would like to refer back and share with you a personal anecdote. Earlier this year, I was invited by the Foreign Ministry here, by my colleague Delphine O, as part of a strategic partnership with the Office of the Special Envoy to bring a delegation of Yemeni women to attend the AI Global Summit, which, thankfully for the efforts of France, was focusing on inclusion this year. So we brought, as a delegation, the perspective of women, peace and security. And I remember when I was on a panel to discuss multilateralism and how to regulate AI, I asked for the delegation of Yemeni women who came from across Yemeni cities and villages who had to go through a very difficult route from different cities to go to Cairo and then to come to Paris to stand up and for the public, the audience, to recognize them and to applaud their efforts. I must be frank that at first there was like skepticism, and that skepticism, I want to say, it's not only here in international fora or at the UN or even in the local communities of these women attending AI summit, women from local communities, what do you get to say? Or what's the relevance? So a lot of people were skeptic at first, and especially for those of us who are here in the global north or in Western countries, Yemen only is featured as a country of conflict, as a country that is, if you have knowledge about it, it's related to the maritime security conflict in the Red Sea, or in the conflict between its non-state actor, the Houthis, and Israel, and the strikes that are going back and forth. But to hear about women's stories, what do they have to say about the threats, their concerns, their priorities in establishing an ethical, inclusive AI, that was a real story. So tragically, just few weeks ago, one of the colleagues of these women, who was the first to assume a public role in the city of Taiz, which is besieged by the Houthis, in a public role in the local authority, was assassinated in daylight with more than 20 bullets after a vicious smear campaign against her on social media. And that was a reminder for all of us. Remember the women who came here, they wanted to meet with representatives of international actors, with governments, with big techs, to address the technologically facilitated gender-based violence, and to commit to regularization and to commit to protection measures. So that is, I put it there at the background. But then why and what is the relevance of AI to the conflicts? And how is it reshaping the conflicts? I would say that AI is not only reshaping our world, but it's revolutionizing it. And I would say that it's not a panacea, but it's rather more of a Pandora's box. So there are concerns, challenges, and there are opportunities as well. For us who are committed to a feminist foreign policy and to women, peace and security. All the discussions that are related to new kinds of conflict, to new narratives on security should be our concern as well. The rise of weapons now, before the rise of the weapons, there are AI tools now that can identify food insecurity, predict displacement due to climate change or extreme event. There are also AI military applications, involving algorithms in critical decision-making, from analytical assessments to target selection. Member states last year at the Security Council have raised their concerns over the war in Gaza and how there were concerns about autonomous target selection without human oversight. The deep fake, the potential of deep fake to trigger diplomatic crises and incite unrest undermines also societal stability. Also, issues related to the global north, global south, and building AI capacities so the global south can compete and contribute to the production of AI tools, addressing the risks of unregulated AI that could concentrate power and exacerbate geopolitical tensions. Issues related to ethical considerations, addressing disinformation, inclusive international mechanisms. These are all issues that are being shaping our conflict and needs and are redefining our security. But what about women, and what about the WPS? Here, we must know that when it comes to cyber violence, around 58% of women and girls have faced online harassment, making cyber violence a pressing issue. AI has facilitated the spread of misogynistic content and coordinated harassment, campaigning against targeting women, as the case I've just mentioned. Surveillance technologies, these increasingly target women human rights defenders, amplifying their vulnerabilities, especially in conflict zones like Yemen and other. When it comes to the resolutions related to the women, peace and security, very little that has been said about these, about cyber security. In fact, it's absent. When it comes to NAP, the WPS NAP, since 2020, we have almost 107 countries who have developed their national action plans for the WPS agenda, and most lack focus on cyber security. Now, we realize that this is it's redefining our understanding of security. But the question is, how can we, and I will give the 5 recommendations, how can we leverage the WPS to effectively navigate the risks and opportunities presented by digital innovation AI? Integrate WPS perspectives into AI development, addressing the biases in algorithms to ensure they represent the needs and marginalized of communities. 2, foster ethical, inclusive AI in negotiations, and which we are, as an Office of the Special Envoy for Yemen, we are working on that, and we have established our digital consultations to reach out to broader communities. Combat cyber violence by establishing robust legal frameworks addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and empower women to participate safely in online discussions. 4, promote human-centric cybersecurity. We need to have a shift towards a human-centric approach, prioritizing people's safety and well-being in cybersecurity measures rather than focusing primarily on digital systems security. 5, and finally, human-centered military AI, urging member states to adopt a human-centered approach to military AI, ensuring compliance with international humanitarian law, preserving human judgment in critical decisions.
So,
I would like to conclude
you have
with
to,
just
to conclude, please.
Yes, for this a statement by the Secretary General. Artificial intelligence without human oversight would leave the world blind, especially in the realm of global peace and security. In navigating the digital age, we must adopt a feminist foreign policy that combines the WPS, placing people at the center, with a commitment to ethical AI. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much.
Madame Sandino,
Madame Sandino, you were a member of the FARC insurgency in Colombia for 24 years. Then you negotiated and signed the 2016 peace agreement with the Colombian government. You were the only woman, a spokesperson, in the peace process. As a woman, what was it that was different in your input? And do you think there is a feminist approach to conflict resolution? And how can we guarantee lasting peace?
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak Spanish. So thank you very much again to Ambassador Athene, to the Ambassador from Colombia, and thank you in particular for allowing me to participate in this event, to be able to share my feeling with you in this last session of the conference. I'm a feminist woman, part of the delegation which negotiated the peace in Colombia, and I was part of the discussions and conversations that led up to them. And I was one of the voices which made possible focusing on gender equality in the peace agreement of 2016, which was historic for Colombia, but also for the rest of the world, regarding negotiations leading to peace. And the question that brings us together today is to say whether anything new was included to these negotiations when we decided to focus on gender issues. Well, the answer is yes, absolutely, and definitely yes. What was new is that we incorporated the voice of women, not only the voice of women who were part of the fighting forces, who were represented and sitting at the table in negotiations, but the voice of women in Colombia who carry on fighting relentlessly to build peace in my country. So what else was new was that we incorporated the resistance with something unprecedented, and the different voices have, I repeat, us, the fighters, part of the FARC, and the voices of the women from different territories, indigenous women, rural women, black women, who were fighting and were suffering from the conflict. My participation in the negotiation was deeply political and deeply feminist. we managed to set up the subcommission focused on gender in the middle of negotiations. This wasn't at all anticipated when we started. It just happened as we went along. And we managed to set it up. It was something totally new, unprecedented, I repeat it. And from there, we worked day in, day out, so that the agreement, the peace agreement, would mention us, the women, and our experience of war, in war, and of the women living in remote territories suffering from the consequences of the conflict, and that constantly. So we pushed for the acknowledgement of the violences suffered by women in these conflicts, but also the role of the politics behind that. Now, if the focus on gender issues allowed us to move on to more feminist focus of conflict resolution, I would say that this allowed us to reach, or we managed to make the connection between this idea of rights, women's rights, and feminism. So there was a lot of noise and talk in our country, which is a country that has been marred by violence, and a country which is quite conservative, and a country in which women's rights seem to be like a crime or a misdemeanor. No. But that was not sufficient. Naming women as a part of the agreement, that we wanted to be included in a cross-cutting way in the negotiation of the agreements, was fundamental too. I mean, it was fundamental not only for our own experience, but because it was something new. Women need to remain part and parcel of negotiations. Their voices need to be heard, and women in their diversity, women from remote territories, women academics, Black women, indigenous women, you name it, all women. And they need to be part of the decision-making process. Now, first step, the first process, was logically the negotiation process, and that's fundamental, of course, but it's not the only one, because we had to carry on fighting in favor of the implementation of said agreements so that they could become real in our practice, and that then again women were not excluded, because they have always been so. Now, having a feminist focus in the negotiation goes through daily life and caretaking. Being attentive and careful in conflict resolution, we have to pay attention and take care of life, take care of our environment, and take care of whatever is around us. And the environment is the result of war and violence that has been has suffered from violence and war. So the feminist focus allows to concentrate on incorporating women's priorities, and not just like acknowledging something that is less important. No, by including women's agenda in transitional justice, the transitional justice that we want for our countries and for women in particular. And what we've learned in the process is that mediation is not something that only happens in foreign ministries, and with all due respect, with what all of us are doing here and all of you are doing all over the world. No. Diplomacy is something that is done in the different territories through mediation, negotiation. And I would like to invite you to see how these women from our territories are faced with violence and faced with conflict, but do not act as victims. They act with a propensity to find a solution. They want to save lives, they want to safeguard their community, they want to remain secure. So these women who act as mediators, even with the armed forces, they are there, and they are there where the state does not manage to penetrate or does not want to be part of. So that is the voice of the women I would like you to listen to in events like this one, where you, people who are part of cooperation and part of the diplomatic circle, can take a look at these mediations that are feminist and community-based, carried out by women that are seeking peace. And you have to bear in mind that you have women who are still part of armed forces and who still want to find a dialogue and still need to be heard too. And lastly, I can only encourage you and invite you to make it happen, to make sure that this feminist foreign policy, this feminist diplomacy, becomes something strategic that can try and curtail violence, because we mentioned the different voices here, and we mentioned how money is invested, all the budgets are invested in war. Well, feminist diplomacy can have an impact so that the voices in favor of peace and the voices of women with their own agenda are heard. Like we say in Colombia, war must end to the direct action of women, and peace must be built with the voice and effective participation of women. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that account of your historical experience, and also for your inspiring recommendations. I would now give the floor to Ambassador Takahashi Katsuko to wind up our round table. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to give a chance to make a concluding remarks at today's session in the capacity of co-chairs of the Focal Points Network of WPS. I'd like to extend my respect and gratitude to Foreign Minister Barrot and the French government for organizing this important conference and for commitments toward gender equality. I would also like to extend my deep gratitude to all the panelists for their engaging and thought-provoking statements related to WPS agenda, especially in the light of conflicts and emerging challenges that we are facing across the world today. In meeting related WPS, I always feel strongly that without knowing what's actually happening on the ground, we cannot create good action plans. Ladies and gentlemen, just 2 days ago, Japanese Parliament elected Ms. Sanae Takaichi as a Prime Minister, and she became Japan's first female Prime Minister. Today's meeting is timely and appropriate for Japan to reiterate our resolve to continue our effort toward gender equality and women's empowerment, which is one of the most important elements to promote peace and prosperity, both at home and abroad. As conflicts multiply and the foundation of the international order are being tested, it has become even more crucial to integrate the WPS perspective into every aspect of our policies. Japan has been placing WPS at the heart of its foreign policy from this viewpoint. We are also applying the WPS approach to disaster risk reduction and emergency response, as natural disasters occur frequently in Japan. In our current National Action Plan on WPS, we set disaster risk reduction as one of the main pillars, and in close cooperation with relevant ministries and partners, we have been implementing and sharing these efforts both domestically and internationally. I had a chance to take part in the WPS meeting organized by ASEAN, and I hear from the ASEAN countries that they also pay much attention on the aspect of disaster risk reduction in preparing their national action plan on WPS. As the effects of climate change intensify, women and girls are often placed in disproportionately vulnerable situations. Therefore, applying the WPS perspective in the context of disaster prevention and management is both meaningful and necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, Japan is honored to serve alongside with Norway as co-chair of the WPS Focal Points Network. Please allow me to highlight what we are doing in this anniversary year. To commemorate the 25th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolutions 1325, the network operates under the theme, Deepening WPS Commitments for Action, Advancing Peace and Security through Innovation and Implementation. In fulfilling our responsibility, we are deeply grateful to UN Women, headed by Ms. Shimabahus, for serving as a network secretariat and for its invaluable support throughout this year. Shukran lakum. At the Tokyo meeting held in February, participants explored ways to further expand the WPS agenda, including its application to new and emerging issues, including disaster management, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. The discussion highlighted the importance of promoting women's leadership and participation in these areas and underlined the potential of AI and digital tools to facilitate greater engagement of women in peace and security efforts. The second meeting was held in Oslo in May. That meeting generated rich discussions around the inclusion of women in peace building and peace negotiations and how these roles are recognized and supported. Building on the outcome of the Tokyo and Oslo meetings, we hosted a high-level WPS FPN side event during the UN General Assembly High-Level Week in New York last month. At this event, many countries, including several at the ministerial level, reaffirmed their commitments in advancing WPS on the occasion of the 25th anniversary, demonstrating our shared political will to move forward together. I find this conference hall some of the faces who took part in the meetings in Tokyo, Oslo, and New York, and I really want to express my gratitude for your participation. The network aims to promote stronger global commitments to WPS by sharing best practices and lessons learned among participating countries and organizations. Now, the Focal Points Network has grown to include 106 countries and organizations, serving as a vital platform to promoting WPS globally. We sincerely welcome further participation to this network from new partners. October this month is the month of the adoption of the Resolution 1325 25 years ago, and I understand that numerous events are taking place in various locations. Recent open debate on WPS at the UN Security Council in New York is one example. I hope these discussions will build even greater global momentum for the advancement of the WPS agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are witnessing growing backlash against gender equality and women's rights around the world, as previous speakers already pointed out. Precisely because of these challenges, the steadfast implementation of the WPS agenda is more important than ever. women's participation in decision-making across all stages from prevention to response and recovery is essential to achieving sustainable peace. And we must also remember that WPS agenda is not something to be activated only in time of crisis. It must be pursued continuously, even in times of peace. We must deepen our collective commitment to implement WPS across the globe. Planning is important, but implementation is more important. Governments, international organizations, civil society, and partners across generations must work hand in hand to translate our shared commitments into concrete actions at the national, regional, and international levels. Japan, drawing on our experience as co-chair of the WPS Focal Points Network, will continue to stand with all of you in advancing women's rights, equality, and justice, and in ensuring the effective implementation of WPS and the realization of gender equality worldwide. We're really looking forward to continue working together with all of you. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Mesdames et messieurs, l'union fait la force.
Ladies and gentlemen, union is strength. So I'd like to thank our panelists for your brilliant contributions, all of which are inspiring and point to a good future for WPS. This brings us to the end of the last plenary of the 4th Ministerial Conference for Feminist Foreign Policies. I would now like to call on the Secretary General Delphine Hull to give us the final statement.
Thank you very much to the panelists and the moderator. I will not offer closing remarks, as I will do this at the cocktail following. So just so that you know, we have about an hour before the buses start going to the place of the cocktail, so enjoy a cup of coffee. And buses will leave from here at about 5:30, and the cocktail opens at 6:30. So see you there. Thank you very much all.
Thank you.